I was studying to be a dentist. More broadly, in the dental career I was studying, it was all just poison. It wasn't. I went in with the expectation that I was going to be there to help people, but all the materials we were using were poisonous. We were making, wrong diagnoses. We could start with fluoride. Fluoride was a big one. The actual process of drilling out mercury fillings and the vapor that produces, that's just straight into the lungs.
Hello and welcome to Resistance GB. Today I'm here with Tom. Tom, would you like to introduce yourself and say where you're from?
Yeah, so we're here at the People's Reset UK, and I guess I am here because I'm honouring a past version of me who felt like I had no power to do anything. When this whole COVID scamdemic rolled around, I was studying to be a dentist at that time. In my first year of uni, had a pretty normal upbringing by all standards, nothing particularly controversial or out there about how I was living my life in all the mainstream systems, so forth. And throughout that process, I was very quickly realizing that something wasn't up with what was happening, to the point that I realized the whole medical system and the medical education system that had formed around the National Health Service in this country, but the problem spreads around the world in a lot of Western medicine, is that it was just harming people. First with COVID policy, but then that was a segue for me to realize that more broadly in the dental career I was studying, it was all just poison. It wasn't. I went in with the expectation that I was going to be there to help people with their health, but all the materials we were using were poisonous. We were making, wrong diagnoses. I like what Carl said earlier about diagnosis is two people who don't know what's happening. but it's all of that was just super crushing to me. My whole worldview had completely flipped on its head, and there was no one I could talk to. There was no one around me who seemed anywhere near close to the perspectives that I'd taken on this, and that was super crushing for me.
Well, tell me, what was the sort of moment when you started to wake up? How far into your dentistry course were you when you started to question things?
So, COVID hit in around the 6-month mark, and up until that point, I was sort of just going in with the motions. It was a lot of basic science at that point. But I remember one of the things that really started me off on the path was a conversation in January 2020 where we were talking about why masks were used in dental settings. And the answer we were given there was, it's not for infections, it's not for viruses, it's a splash guard for blood. And they were very particular about get rid of the mask the moment you're nowhere near the patient and not doing any operations, because it harbors bacteria, it's not good for your health. That was a grain that stuck with me as we went into the first lockdowns, which I was already becoming quite skeptical of. I took the view that COVID was this big health scare. As someone going into the health industry, I saw it as my responsibility to think, okay, right, what is up with this new thing called COVID? What do I need to know about it so that I'm in a good position to be treating patients properly? And already we'd had in, I think, mid-March 2020, the update from Health Safety England saying it was no different to a common cold or flu in terms of risk level. And then suddenly we were thrown into these lockdowns. I thought, okay, something's up here. At least I thought maybe it's just a case of politics doesn't understand the science and so forth. But then we get the whole case of masks don't work, and then a very sudden U-turn to say, okay, you've got to wear them constantly, in complete contradiction to what we'd been taught in dental school. But the dental school just went along with it, saying, oh, this is the way it is. And that was a real turning point for me to say, hang on, what's going on here isn't about science at all. It isn't about health. It's just about diktat and policy and whatever the powers that may be want to happen. And so that was the journey for me to begin to realize, well, okay, if this isn't really about health, this particular instance about masks, what else is not about health? And so it's been a long journey for me, and it got to the point where it was, I couldn't operate morally and keep my soul intact in that system anymore, because it just wasn't about health.
So what were some of the things within the dentistry industry or that you were learning that you then began to question and see as harmful?
So we could start with fluoride. Fluoride was a big one. Very much claimed that, fluoride is this, miracle substance that mineralizes your teeth, keeps it protected, perfectly safe and effective. And yeah, I was soon realizing that, well, hang on, why are we putting it in water supplies? Because it doesn't stay on the teeth. You're just swallowing it. And then I was looking into the studies, looking at calcification of the pineal gland, amongst many other things, realizing there was a very long list of Nobel Prize-winning scientists who were cautioning the use of fluoride for all sorts of reasons, both because it was, it killed off everything in lab studies that they did with microbes, to it simply not making sense. If you're trying to put it on the teeth, why are you ingesting it in your system? And, if it's such a good treatment, why is it that teeth are being varnished with fluoride pretty much every visit to the dentist? None of that made sense to me. So there was the fluoride.
Can I say, what you said really chimes with me, because I can understand if you say fluoride's good for your teeth, to put it in toothpaste, because you have toothpaste specifically on your teeth, you leave it for 2 minutes or something like that. But just putting it in the water, that takes away your option of choosing whether you're taking this medication.
But even in the toothpaste, most of that, that's not really staying on your teeth for a very long period of time. Most of it's swirled around and then spat out. It's not staying there at all. And with enough drinks or even fizzy drinks, whatever, in the day, it's just going to be washed off immediately. And there are studies showing that the actual amount of mineralization, the amount of fluoride that gets onto the surface of the teeth, is pretty minimal and could be wiped out by most drinks and most foods that we eat because they're acidic in nature.
So you said there's calcification of the pineal gland. Mm-hmm. What other effects are there from fluoride?
So the calcification of the pineal gland was the main one that sort of got my radar pinging. I believe there are other studies about calcification elsewhere in the body. It's been a while since I looked at them. I left a few years ago. I can't recall the studies off the top of my head, but that was the big one that came to mind there.
And it's also, is it categorized as a waste product as well? I've been told that it's an industrial waste product.
Yes, so there is a book, I can't remember his name, that talks about the history of fluoride was as a waste product from making nuclear bombs, and that there was this whole process of the dental industry in the US being bought out, so they had a means to get rid of all this sodium fluoride that they had as a waste product. It's used as rat poison as well. I can't remember the name of the book off the top of my head. I have it on my shelf and I can picture it right there, but very well researched. It's very well regarded.
Maybe we can stick a link below.
Yeah, I can certainly find the book that it is. Yeah.
So what else is there that's an issue within dentistry?
Mercury is still a big issue. People think it's been banned in the UK. It's not. It's still in place until 2030. And They're not ruling it out because of health concerns. They're ruling it out because it's too difficult to dispose of in an environmentally friendly way that doesn't harm the ecosystem. But if you've got admittance that it's harming life, if it gets into water supplies or into natural systems, then why would it not harm people? And we know that mercury is one of the most toxic substances on the planet. And a lot of people in the industry will say, well, it's in a mix of other metals so that it's all very safe and contained and doesn't leach out. But we know that it does. And there's plenty of studies to show that it does. And there's plenty of studies to show that not only mercury in the body causes a problem, but the actual process of drilling out mercury fillings and the vapor that produces, that's just straight into the lungs and causes all sorts of problems. I remember I had a patient as a dental student who had a failing mercury filling, and I was tasked with replacing it with another mercury filling. And this was still at a time where, well, I had an idea that mercury was pretty toxic at that time, and I'm not happy that I ultimately went through with that procedure, because that was the diktat that was given to me from my supervisors to say, you're going to put another mercury filling in it. I'm not proud of that, especially with me trying to take out that filling and put in a new filling. Very suddenly, he's off ill from work for 2 weeks with a chest infection. Whereas he was perfectly fine when he came into me, and it started almost instantly after this procedure to take out the old filling.
And this is where he would be breathing as you were doing
yes.
it, and there are small shards, and there would be some sort of vapor.
Shards of vapor, so the actual drill is going to vaporize it. There are some very good dentists out there, and the IAOMT, predominantly based in the States, has got a lot of work around what is a safe way to remove mercury and showing that mercury vapor when drilling out is a problem. But this is not explained to me in the dental system. I had to go and find this all out myself and actually look through all the papers to see that this was a problem. And when this patient who was under my care suddenly developed this severe chest infection for a few weeks, it was obvious to me that it wasn't a chest infection, it was mercury poisoning. And that was his body trying to fight that off.
What are some of the other effects that mercury can have?
So there's a big link between mercury fillings and MS. There's a couple of books actually on that. And I've seen it. I did, while I was still deciding whether I wanted to continue with that system or not, with all this knowledge I was gaining, I had some very fortunate opportunities to spend time with practicing dentists who were aware of a lot of these problems and were trying to do things differently. And I had the opportunity to see one of the patients that one of these dentists were working with, who was showing that over time they'd been improved, her multiple sclerosis had improved in conjunction with these mercury fillings being removed, because there is a link between mercury exposure and MS.
And so it can leach out over time into the body?
Yeah, correct.
So would you advise that a person with mercury fillings has them replaced then?
Yes. However, a lot of dentists, if you say, can I have them removed, they're just going to drill them straight out without a lot of protective procedures, which the moment they drill into that mercury, releases tons of vapor in one go. He's shuddering already.
Yeah, well, I've got a couple of fillings, and I'm not sure whether they're mercury or not, but I've got a couple of metal fillings from when I was a kid.
Okay.
And now you're making me panic here, so I'm
sweating. There are dentists who are very conscious of this. The IAOMT is a great resource. They do a safe mercury filling removal accreditation scheme, which involves lots of things like really high suction to get all the vapor out instantly the moment it's drilled, drills that make sure there's not as much vapor. There's so much that goes into it, but that's the level that dentistry and medicine more broadly has gotten to. It's crazy. It is crazy.
They say trust your instincts. You never like the dentist.
No.
Right? It's an instinct, and it's there for a reason. It's because they may be poisoning you. How many dentists out there would you say there are who do this process of safe mercury removal? And do you think a lot of dentists would be open to doing it if you presented them with the requirements?
So there are, to my mind, there's only a handful in the UK. There's a lot more in the States who are on it, but the number is growing. And from what I've heard from dentists who do practice it in the UK and who are doing really good jobs at trying to make other dentists aware of this, Dr. Seb Lomas, biological dentist, does really good stuff on this online. We'll leave a link. Great evidence base for all the stuff he does, sharing what he's doing. But he's a big advocate for the safe mercury filling removal as well. And he's told me stories that there are other dentists seeing what he's doing. He's making a lot of posts on social media to say this is how he does it, and other dentists are getting interested in it, which is good to see.
You know, there's that theory, and I don't think it's fully credible, but there's the theory that the reason the Roman Empire collapsed was because they used lead piping and they're all drinking this lead water and they poisoned themselves. People go, how stupid they were to use lead in all of their piping. And you look at human beings
How stupid
today.
were we to put mercury in people's mouths?
I've probably got mercury in my mouth.
It's not the end of the world.
The good thing is, I know someone who knows an awake dentist, so I think I'm actually going to go to the dentist with this information, ask them whether they can look it up and whether they could actually do this treatment for me. But this is absolutely terrifying. Is there anything else within dentistry that I should be on the lookout for?
There's a few things I could go into. Root canals is a whole huge topic in and of itself.
Could you explain it in brief to a layman or novice?
That a lot of the current techniques that are used, especially in the NHS, are not sufficient for clearing out dead tissue that's the root canals are trying to remove. And they admit this in their own studies themselves. And that the actual filling, the materials that they put in can be toxic themselves.
So mercury again or something else?
No, normally radioactive heavy metals so that they show up on x-rays is normally a big one.
Oh, I see.
But there's a lot of them, especially the NHS ones, are synthetic rubbers as well. That doesn't strike me as the best, but the main thing is the heavy metals that are deliberately designed to make it show up on x-rays.
Are there alternatives to those?
Yeah, so there are alternative materials, and there's still some in the works at the moment. I've been out the system a while because I wasn't comfortable not having access to a lot of those materials. They are out there, and there are a lot of dentists who do alternatives to root canals completely. A lot of ozone work has been shown to be really effective. So using ozone gas to clear up infections and areas of dying tissue without the need for root canals, which is really promising and less invasive. But a lot of dental practices don't have that kit.
Or how does it work? Do they, blast gas into it and it just
Essentially,
blows it out? Or,
essentially. And the ozone itself just clears through all the tissues, essentially, because of the nature of the molecule.
Oh, so it is possible to do
It
these
is
things
possible,
safely.
but it's a lot of. In some ways, some of the kit is quite new, and it's expensive for a lot of practices to go through it. When especially the NHS ones will get paid if they just do a root canal anyways. But it is there, and awareness is growing, which is nice to see. But there's still a long way to go.
What else would you say? So we've got fluoride, mercury, the way they do root canals.
There's lots of little things, even down to the white fillings. I would say the white fillings are better than having mercury in your mouth, but a lot of the common ones have still got a lot of plasticizers and hormone mimicking substances that are going to be affecting the body's biochemistry, and there's tons of papers on that. Again, there are white fillings with less of those substances in. There's none that are absolutely perfect, but there are some that are way better than others. So as the white fillings there, there's the amount of x-rays that a lot of dentists take. All x-ray is radiation by its very nature. And a lot of the, I guess, holistic dentists are conscious that sometimes they may need an x-ray just so they've got an idea of what they're working with, especially for someone who's had really complex fillings or root canals and they're trying to undo some of that damage. Sometimes there's no real way around, it's too much just to drill straight into the tooth without knowing what's there, what the bone's like. But just getting, tons and tons of x-rays constantly is not good for the body's tissues. So there's the x-rays. They're sort of the big ones that come to mind for me, and were a lot of the reasons why I said I can't continue in this industry and training, because I've got to, do all these things that I know to be toxic and all the studies say are toxic, just to get the piece of paper to then start doing things differently. That was crazy to me.
With the white fillings, are they they're sort of enamel ones that they do?
So there's the white fillings themselves are generally a plastic type filling. You can have crowns and bridges, which can be ceramics or ceramics, metal understructures. But in terms of actual fillings, most of them are a plastic or a resin.
What is the safest out of those, would you say?
There's the white fillings are, if it's just fillings we're talking about, the white fillings are probably the best. And there are cases where they're called zirconia, as inlays might be suitable. It's a case by case basis. Most of the time it's going to be a white filling, but there are white fillings which are going to be leaching a lot less plasticizers than others. But the only person who's going to know that is the dentist. You're going to have to ask them, do you know what filling you're using, how they're making those fillings? Is there BPA in it? Is there not? And if they can't answer those questions, I'd be concerned if I needed a white filling and they couldn't answer those questions for me, because I know that there are dentists that take a lot of care in looking into that, and who can say, yeah, I'm not using this brand because the amount of BPA it leaches is off the charts.
Is it necessary? I know this seems like a little bit of an about turn, but are you familiar with the work of Weston A. Price?
Yes, yeah. So that was part of my journey he was the one who did a lot of work on root canals as well. And then the whole nutrition thing came to me as well. And I realized, hang on, we're doing all this dental work, but the amount we do on nutrition is so surface level. It's essentially just eat less sugar. But there's so much more to it than that. And we don't really talk much about the processed foods in the training and just the actual quality of the food that we get. But yeah, Weston A. Price was something that came up in my time of trying to work out, okay, what is the best way for me to treat people? And it was obvious from his work that so much of the treatment that we're meant to do could be prevented with a good lifestyle and good diet that we're just not prioritizing.
And so what do you make of the evidence which he presents regarding people in the past who had primarily meat-based diets and very low-carb diets having wider faces and less crowded teeth?
I find it generally very compelling, and that's kind of been continued now to modern day. We've got John Mew and then Mike Mew who's taken that a step further and looked at the implications for crowding of teeth and of orthodontics, for instance, to say, yeah, the actual diet is a huge... the fact that our diets have gotten so much softer and grain-based is why our faces have gotten narrow. It's why our teeth are crowding. It's why bad food is getting caught between the teeth that's then causing decay, because it's bad food as well in the first place.
So it's not just the nutrition, it's
the actual physical
act
chewing.
of chewing.
Yeah, I think in tribes, we used to spend something like 3 hours a day chewing.
What?
Imagine chewing for 3 hours solid.
Wait. If you've got a meat-based diet, why would you need to chew for 3 hours?
Well, a lot of them weren't cooking it a lot of the time. It was raw meat. Some of that is quite chewy. There's fibrous foods that are tough. We were designed to chew for long periods of the day, and there's a lot of work. The Muse have shown that, especially that facial structure and the development of our jaws and our airways is heavily linked to that process of us chewing.
So
the muscles pulling it out, creating space.
So if you've got kids, you want to be feeding your kids proper meats which they have to chew. So give your kids a steak.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not in a position to be able to say, okay, what's the exact right time to do that?
But it will be good at some point.
Yeah,
Definitely.
they're gonna need food to pull out the jaw and create space for all the teeth to erupt properly.
And obviously, it'll make him look a bit more Chad.
There is that.
So if you want your child to be attractive and also have good teeth,
get them to chew their food. Don't give them something mushed on a plate that they could scoff down in a minute. So to properly chew their food at a meal. Ooh. I think Mike Mew had a practice that he sort of recommended at meal times, is that each swallow should be 20 chews before you go for another bite, and just making that a ritual and habit just to make sure there's enough action on the muscles to be developing the jawbone properly.
So can you still develop your jawbone once you get to a later age, or does it?
My understanding is it's more difficult. There are cases where people have gotten incredible results quite late on. But under 25 is a lot easier than over 25, from my understanding of his work. And he does incredible stuff online. He did an excellent interview with Brett Weinstein, actually, Locking the Gates of Dentistry, I think the video was called. That's a really good rundown of his work that's accessible for general audiences. So
we brush our teeth every day, or most people brush their teeth every day, usually twice a day. Is that necessary? Because in the past, would we have actually brushed our teeth very much at all?
Back in a lot of tribal communities, probably not, no. My own approach at the moment is there's a lot of sugary foods and foods we're not designed to eat that are soft that are going to get caught in teeth. Depending on our diet, there might be a case to brush it. But I know dentists who haven't brushed their teeth in 20 years because they've gotten their diet so under control and not had any problems with their teeth whatsoever. I think there are depending on, if you are having lots of processed grains in diet and processed foods, probably are going to want to brush that off, because that stuff's not good. It's not what we're designed to eat. But I know people who've made it work without brushing. Dentists who've made it work without brushing.
With what sort of diets?
Generally very, very low to no carb, very close to, I guess, raw-based diets, or very minimal cooking and preparation. It's a lot of I think for a lot of people's diets at the moment and the kind of foods they are eating, there's a case to brush them. The actual twice a day thing came from the idea that those 2 times a day will make up for the days where you're not brushing.
Oh.
So it's to try and that's like a gold standard, but there's sort of an inbuilt obsolescence to say if you miss a day, the other, if you do it 2 times the next day, it should catch up. So in that regards, it's a little bit arbitrary, and there's so many factors that go into why people get decay and problems with their teeth. But that's where the sort of catch-all idea of 2 times a day comes from. But yeah, depending on what someone's diet is, there might be cases where they can not brush for 20 years and be absolutely fine.
Do you know anything about raw milk?
Yeah, I love a good. So for a while I was getting raw milk, making kefir out of the raw milk and having raw milk smoothies, and they were so good. But yeah, so my understanding is that raw milk has long been I guess, used as a medicinal food by a lot of people. And we've got Western A Price Foundation here, who that's one of their big campaigns is proper milk, because there's a lot of nutrient and fat content in raw and processed milk that can be really good for a lot of people. The moment we start heat treating it and filtering it and processing milk, strips out all the goodness. And if we look at people with dairy intolerances, a lot of that is lactose. In raw milk, the lactose is actually a much, much smaller percentage of the overall milk, because a lot of it is just fat.
I see. So it's actually easier to drink raw milk than it is to
Yeah,
drink.
and there are lots of cases where people who've been told they've got dairy allergies or lactose allergies are actually fine drinking completely raw milk because of that exact reason. It's actually a very low percentage of lactose in there. There's so much. And the more I understood just how many layers of things had gone on that had twisted what our healthy, natural lives should be compared to what the health industry is saying is the norm and what we should be doing, I realized that it's not interested in health at all. It's interested in making repeat customers for prescriptions and treatments, and not about healing people. And so I got 3.5 years into my training, and I just said, no, I can't do this anymore. This is not what I signed up for.
It's 3.5 years in.
Yeah, out of 5.
Wow.
Yeah, I took a pause for a few months while I worked out, is this the right decision to leave? And I ultimately came to the decision, yes, it was. And so, yeah, I've been out for 1.5 years now and not regretted it. I haven't regretted it, because I know if I'd stayed in that system, it would have been either more and more poisoning, or I wouldn't have been allowed to progress any further in my studies because I hadn't ticked off a checklist of specific treatments that I have to provide to show that I'm competent.
Do you think that we have a problem in this country with these so-called registered professions where you require a certificate to perform them rather than simply the confidence of the person with whom you're performing these tasks? For example, lawyers, registered profession, so you have to go through their training. You have to do what they want in their way in order to practice as a lawyer. Even if someone wants to hire you as one, they can't. Same thing for dentistry. If you go around practicing dentistry, you'll be locked in a little box.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think that we need to move away from that system?
There has to be something different, because we're now in a place where the current certification scheme, the requirements and the accreditation that's agreed to get that, there have been so many corrupt interests have gone into that, and it's so far removed from actually demonstrating competence of a practitioner to help people towards health, that it's meaningless at this point. It's gone to a point where the certificate doesn't mean anything. It might show that they have some technical capabilities in being able to actually make the right size hole for a filling to go into, but it's not, to me, it doesn't indicate anything about health at all.
Or critical thinking.
Or critical thinking. So I don't know exactly what the solution is. That's recognized, that at least ensures some degree of safety, other than at some point there's going to have to be a level of discernment from the individuals who go to a dentist to say, okay, here's what this dentist is telling me about what he can do. Can I see other examples of his work? Does it actually make sense? Can I ask questions and get reasonable answers, and answers that make sense in return? whatever happens, there has to be far more from the patients to say, look, I've got this problem with me, and here's what I need to know to be able to put my trust in you to say, yes, you can actually do this. And right now, I don't think we're in a place where a lot of people can do that. A lot of people go to the dentist and say, just fix me, which is sad. And I saw a lot of that. And I understand it in a way because of how many pressures there are in society. There's a lot that goes on there economically, socially, culturally, that can bring people down to that state to say, I've not got the agency to choose what happens here. But it's harming people. That apathy. And
I think maybe we might need to move to a free market, because I don't know. Well, no, I think almost definitely we need to move to a free market, because the thing is, there is such a thing as private regulation.
mm-hmm.
So private
Correct.
regulation, you've even had this on the Silk Road. So you know Silk Road on the on the dark web. Yeah, you can have these systems where people review.
Yes.
They talk about the standards that were met, and you can also have organisations that actually review on behalf of customers. So you can apply for certification from this organisation. If it turns out it's corrupt, well, then that's fraud. They can be locked up if you've got a functioning court system, which we don't, unfortunately. But if we did, I think it would work as a system. And you can rely on people's feedback, and you can rely on what dentists say.
Even the IAMT's Safe Mercury removal scheme, they're a completely independent body. They came up with that themselves, this scheme. But you can see all the studies that they went into doing it, all their methodology, how they designed that accreditation. And that's really become a hallmark and a starting point for a lot of people to say, okay, the dentists who are doing this, they know what they're doing, because they've seriously taken the time to look at the studies to say, this mercury is harmful enough that I need to do something about it in my practice. So, that is an example of the free market. It's not regulated that dentists have to go out and get that accreditation, but they can. And to me, if I see a dentist and they've got that, that's a good sign for me initially, because it shows that they are thinking critically, they are thinking about their patient's health, and they're thinking, what is the best way that I can protect the health of patients who are coming to me? And it does speak to the free market element there that you are speaking of.
Do you feel robbed at all? Because you spend 3.5 years of your life training for this thing. You were told to do the wrong thing, as far as you can see from the studies. You've raised that with them. You said, this is the wrong thing. I don't think I can do this. And they've said that you cannot now go and practice the profession which you've been training to do. You cannot practice it safely. When they'll let other people go and practice dangerously, they'll let other people harm people because you just haven't ticked their boxes. Do you feel like you've been robbed? Because you would be making, 60k a year or something by now? Or you'd just be starting?
So you'd be on
30k, but within 5 years you'd be up to 60 or maybe even 100.
Yeah, I definitely feel deceived and robbed, because I had no idea that that's what the system actually was going into it. I trusted that the checks and balances, the laws that were in place, and the regulation and the accreditation schemes were designed with patients' health in mind. When it became clear to me that they were either actively ignoring what so many doctors and scientists were finding around the world to say, hang on, some of our practices really aren't working for patients and making them worse, or actively suppressing it, of course I feel robbed and cheated.
What was the reception from your course supervisors when you brought everything up with them?
The discussions I had with them didn't really go anywhere.
What did they say? What was their justification?
The mindset there was that's just the way it is. That's what we're taught to do. That is the science, the guidelines and the evidence base that we have. That is the science, and that
I am the
nothing else
science.
is. Yeah, that's what it is. And I think a lot of the people in the system feel, if there are some that are thinking it's not right, they're just as powerless as I felt.
Is there somewhere else that maybe you could get accreditation in a different country? Maybe.
I would have to go through the entire system from the beginning. I'm not in a place where I'm interested in going back into it, because I don't think from my understanding, I don't think there's a country in the world that I could go and do that in reasonably, knowing what I know now. And
No countries, not even small ones.
not that I'm aware of. And I'm at the point where I'm not interested in going back into that system. I know there's far more work for me to do on community and cultural levels that are going to help people develop critical thinking and discernment skills that I can actively make a difference in than going into that system. And I know there's about 10 lifetimes work for me there if I want it. I can't see how that system survives. Why would I want to? I think it has to collapse. I mean, even in the mainstream, they say dentistry is collapsing for whatever reasons. I think some of those are legitimate, but that's only a small part of the picture. To me, there are far more fundamental problems with how dentistry and medicine as a whole is being practiced within hospitals and dental practices that just makes it completely unsustainable.
So here's a question. If all of the people who do the right thing, like you, and say that they don't want to do practices that harm people, step off of their courses, who is going to be left to actually treat people? Apart from the people who aren't moral, don't have a moral compass, don't decide to do the right thing. Maybe, I mean, you might wake a few people up who've already gone through that, but who are we going to actually have to do our teeth?
There's not going to be many. There are a few dentists who, I guess, have been through the system and then later on realised that, well after they've completed their training and got the degree, who said, hang on, there are things that I've been doing that aren't right. And so there is a move away towards a more holistic, a biological dentistry is what that movement has sort of become now. And there are dentists in the UK that are doing that, but they're a small number. I think it's going to take time for that to grow. And I think a lot of that, at least in the transition, is going to have to come from dentists who've already gone through the system, who've realised, hang on, now I can do something different. I was at the point where, because I was in the middle of my training when I realised it, to just get to a point where I could have my own practice, having to do treatments that would do more harm to people in the long term than not, I wasn't willing to do that.
So do you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing now?
Yeah, so since then, my focus has shifted to connecting and giving networking, mentoring, and self-development opportunities to young people who felt completely disempowered, like I did in that system. I was depressed. I tried to take my own life just because of the stress of having this entire world collapse around me and not having a network around me that A, understood, and B, could effectively support that. And what I came to realize over these past few years is there's so many other young people in all different walks of life who are trying to pursue all different avenues, who have got so many similar elements to their stories, that a good community, good mentors who actually care about the next generation and having a generation that is able to think critically and can take charge of their own lives. That's completely absent in society as well. If I'd had more of that growing up, I probably could have switched on earlier to say, hang on, what's happening here isn't right. And even in that process, I would have felt a hell of a lot more supported if I had. And society for me is lacking in those real opportunities for young people to be the change they want to see in the world. And so I got involved with Over to the Youth, which was started in 2022 by a Canadian who's a couple of days older than me, Uvius Trozy Newman, and we've been working on this problem ever since. And we've, through a lot of experimentation, we've created some really effective circles for young people with mentors present to really be able to explore the traumas, the self-limiting belief systems, the self-sabotage that's been holding them back. And with that, the societal expectations and the programming that are forced upon them that are negatively synergistic with those ideas.
Well, especially with state education.
Yes.
Because almost every child is being brainwashed.
Oh, yeah.
So when you wake up and you're younger than everyone else, you feel completely out of place.
I did. I was completely in that boat. And it was, through COVID that I realized that. And then when I realized pretty much no one around me was on that same journey, that was tough. It was really tough. And I know so many stories of people who are in the exact same boat. And that's why I know I've got to be here doing this work, because someone's got to do it. And there's so many people out there still who feel alone and who don't have the networks and don't see a way forward. And knowing that almost completely destroyed me, I don't want anyone else to go through that in whatever walk of life they're trying to pursue that.
Well, where can people find out a little bit more information about Over to the Youth?
So best way to do it is overtotheyouth.com, or one word, Over to the Youth. It's all on the website. There's links to everything there. We spend a lot of time trying to make it easily accessible. There's links to, we've started putting a few conversations between our youth members on Substack as well, and we've had a lot of really great feedback about that. So you can see a little bit about what we're doing. All the links to our socials you can find on the website as well.
Do you have events?
So we had a series of online meet and greets all through September for people to just come and learn about what we're doing. We're doing a lot of events internally for our members at the moment. A lot of really great speakers who are coming in to talk directly, privately to the youth that we've got, to give them that space that they might not have had otherwise. And we are working towards some in-person events as well. Hopefully we'll get a big one off next year. That's what I'm aiming for. And
okay, so watch the space.
Yeah, and part of me being here is I'm getting a lot of ideas about how that might happen. So yeah, watch this space.
So you've been talking to people about all these ideas and everything here at the People's Research.
Yeah.
And how's it been?
Oh, it's been such a breath of fresh air for me. It's always rejuvenating for me to come to these sorts of events, because I've done this, I've done Better Way Conference. I was in Serbia for Liability, which was at the start of September. All of these events, all with people trying to find these solutions, who are aware of the amount of craziness that we've ended up in and who just want to find solutions, is phenomenal. And if there's any young people out there who are listening in, maybe they've caught live streams for some of these events and are thinking, oh, it's so cool, I wish I could be there. Come along, come and meet us. And if you can't be there, hey, with Over to the Youth, come and check us out. Send us an application to join, or come and join one of the open sessions that we do online, which we'll be doing once a month going forward. Come and be with us.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Tom.
That's quite all right. Thank you. It's been awesome.
Thanks for watching. Please give us a like, a share, a subscribe, hit the notification button if you would like to help. We've got a Patreon and a Subscribe Star, so please head on over there and pledge us some support if you want to keep this journalism going. We've got a professional studio here, and we could do with your support to keep these great conversations coming.
Hope Sussex community has witnessed firsthand the positive effect community home education can have on children and their families, and it is wondrous. Our mission is to support, enhance and guide freedom-loving families through the empowering and rewarding world of home education. Sessions with tutors start at the incredibly affordable price of just £5.50 an hour and run all day Monday to Wednesday. The groups are small, and as home educators, you can book directly with our independent tutors, attending as many sessions as you like out of the wide range of subjects on offer. As we now begin the 4th year of our journey, our legacy is already taking shape, with children that have previously attended Hope now flourishing at college as critically thinking, compassionate, creative, confident and resilient young adults. At Hope, we are incredibly proud of what we have achieved and extremely excited to be creating the reality we want. A life and world full of love, truth, integrity and freedom.